Lives Matter pin on also.
I'll have to get one of those not dead yet t-shirts.
What size do you wear? I think I've still got some.
A double X.
Oh, I don't think I have any double X's. I'll check though.
Thanks.
I haven't done any not dead yet t-shirts in a while.
All right. So who are we waiting on next, Susan, then? Who are we?
Well, Anita is coming, and I've gotten quite a few people say they're coming. So we'll see if they come.
Okay, Tim Nolan's here. Hey there.
If you can hear us.
And I had one email from a professor from Montclair College that's using the last video that you did in her classes. And so she asked about using this video in her classes too. And I said, sure.
Good.
More people who know about it, the better.
Is this one of the recent videos they're using then?
No, it's one that Not Dead Yet did the very first week we did the MIA during the summer. They did like
Oh.
the first Wednesday we did anything.
Oh, that's quite some time ago, isn't it? Yeah, that one.
Yeah, it seems like a really long time ago.
Ah,
It's less than a year, but it feels like a really long time ago.
problem with this pandemic, isn't it? Everything feels like it's 20 years or longer,
It
even though
just goes on
it's
and
only
on
been
and
this
on
long.
and on
Yeah,
and on.
yeah.
So Tim, I know your name, but I don't know where I know you from.
Yeah, I was on the when Mind Freedom a couple weeks ago. we
Oh.
connected.
That's right. Yes, now I remember
Yeah.
seeing your name. Yes. Glad you're back with us.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's just I have to laugh. You know, this pandemic, the Zoom has just been a kind of a way of life now. And unmute's a new word. It's not in the dictionary, and but I've always been a people person and all that, so it's really just been a major adjustment. But I've spent hours on the phone now with friends across the country.
Well, I was talking to somebody yesterday that said they're a person who has significant autism, and they said they actually are spending more time with people than they ever have before because they don't have to make this constant eye contact with
Yeah.
people in order to communicate, and they can stim and nobody notices because the stimming can be off camera.
Really, an interesting deal. Of I have one of my cousins. Her son is autistic, and his grandma was singing him one day, and he's watching real close, and also he sang the song verbatim. He'd been lip reading all these years. He was learning how to assimilate that. It was just really a phenomenon. And Monica has his name is Jack. She has 4 Jack places that are supportive housing for kids. I have 11 great grandkids. One has autism.
Oh,
And you follow Robert
1 out
Kennedy.
of 11 is not bad.
Yeah, that's not too bad. I guess that's national average or whatever. But but my psychology background, I saved labels for the canned goods. You get to put a label on something. There's that self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's just.
Yeah, actually wonder a lot about that because I know that I have autism because I fit like 90% of the traits for a woman, and
Mhm.
yet I didn't get any diagnosis of it. And my life, I mean, I've done a lot of things in my life that are sort of non-traditional. And when I look at them now with a different sort of perspective, I realize that a lot of those choices were made out of autism. But because there was no sort of discrimination label attached to it, you know, it was just a different way of being, and there was no
Mhm.
sort of marginalization for it. It was just sort of, you know, I was an intellectual, and you know, there were sort of semi-negative connotations to some of the stuff, but you know, a loner, and you know,
Yeah.
doesn't work well in groups, and it's like, yeah, all those things are true, but
But
you know, they
you're
didn't make me
eccentric. That's
disabled,
always
you know,
neat.
when I was a kid.
It's like John Brander, I did my grad work on. He said, you know, eccentricity, embrace your eccentricity. And those in institutions, society has not accepted their way of dealing with frustration.
Yeah.
Lots of adults are now getting tested for autism later in life because of they weren't tested when they were younger, because now, you know, there is now all these tests. Kids get tested now younger, but most adults weren't. So it's not an uncommon thing to find adults discover
Right.
that they had autism or have autism, rather.
Yeah, I think neurodiversity right now has a negative connotation. I'm hoping at some point it'll be thought of as eccentric again.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I'll be 80 March 21st. I don't know what that's going to be all about. The sophomore class, I'm just gonna a few 60 some, well, less than 60 days now in this freshman class. Now the largest growing population a few years back was over 80.
Really?
Being,
Wow.
and being a war baby, we're built in this natural survivors and all that stuff. My brother's 5 years younger. He's a baby boomer. They want it all.
Well, that's why younger folks aren't going to get a COVID vaccine, because it's going to take
Exactly.
forever to get it to all
Yep.
us old folks.
I'm the only one in my building that just said I have allergies. It's a roll of the dice as far as I'm concerned. I don't have any confidence in big pharma.
Well, Norm, I'm glad to see you here.
How are you? Here I am again. All right, no, I'm on for now. I'm back on for now.
Yeah, look at that neat background. Looks like a frosty background. Looks like Minnesota. We've got two seasons, mosquito bite and frostbite.
Oh, we'll start in a couple minutes. We're expecting Anita. We'll give her a little time to get here.
Excuse me. Is anybody else having trouble with the audio?
Oh, I can hear all right.
I'm not. Somebody else having any?
Oh, this is
I'm gonna
Elaine.
try.
So far,
Want
so
to try
good.
rebooting and coming back. We'll wait for you. So Norm, I'm applying for a grant with the Michigan Humanities Council. And part of it's going to be talking to Michigan leaders of the disability movement from the past. And I have you on my list. Of course, you're not just of the past, but anybody who's still around and was active like in the 70s and 80s. In the heyday of Michigan disability advocacy.
Yeah, we have a Minnesota Consortium with Citizens with Disability. I'm part of Brain Injury Alliance. We're under their umbrella. Now we do a Zoom with them once a month.
Well, if they want to do presentations here, we're
Yeah.
open to anybody presenting. Just
Yeah, great.
tell
I'll
them
mention
to
that,
send me a bio and a description.
Yeah.
I was expecting more people, but maybe people are having trouble getting in.
Yeah, sometimes the time zone, like I'm Central and this is you're just Eastern time. I think sometimes people get the conversion deal.
Yeah.
So it looks like we have like 5 people.
Oh, a little more than 5.
That's
Let's
10.
see. That's 10. So
Oh,
it
10.
includes you. So that's 9.
Hi,
Anita
John.
still coming?
Kavanaugh.
So, given we're a small group, at least at this point, we're a small group. Why doesn't anybody introduce themselves and just give a line or two about how familiar you are with assisted suicide issues so we know where to start? Elaine, you want to be the first one to go?
Oh, I'm too shy.
Oh, yeah.
Good
Of course
one,
you are,
Elaine.
Elaine.
Since
Got,
when?
got a good laugh out of some of you. Anyway, yes, hello. I'm Elaine Kolb, she, they, we, and I live in West Haven, Connecticut, and I've been connected with some people know the organization ADAPT, American Disabled for Attendant Programs Today. It used to be for accessible public transportation. Yes, I was involved back then too. And with Not Dead Yet, I was involved when it first got started, and Diane Coleman got it going, and I wrote the song Not Dead Yet. So, yeah, I've been arrested with Not Dead Yet, and I am just so thankful for John Kelly. We have, and for Anita Cameron. And also I see for this gang, another Connecticut person, Joan Kavanaugh, is on. So Joan, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Elaine. Yeah, I'm from New Haven, Connecticut, and I've worked with Elaine and many other people in Second Thoughts, Connecticut, around the repeated introduction of medical assisted suicide bills in the Connecticut State Legislature. Since I've been working on it with folks since 2013. And I unfortunately have a lot of familiarity with it. I also, my particular issue is that I see it as a, in addition to just thinking it's wrong, I see it as a way to just a back door to rationing healthcare. And I've experienced that personally with my mom and with other people I love, because of poverty, because of elderly, because of disability. It's a very frightening thing. And so we're facing it again here in Connecticut. The Public Health Committee is hell-bent on bringing forth another bill this year. They have nothing better else to do, I guess, in a pandemic. So we're facing it again. And that's me. Okay, so I have to pass it to somebody, right? I'll pass it to Ernest. Hi, Ernest.
Hi, I'm Ernest Bow. I'm from Hampshire in England. I'm been part of DAN, which is the the British Disability Civil Rights Organisation for since it nearly began actually. So we've been fighting assisted suicide as one of the issues that people have the right to live. So it is quite a hot topic, obviously, here as it is in America. Pass it to Susan.
Well, I've been part of Not Dead Yet for a long time. I don't remember which came first, but I live in Detroit. So Dr. Kevorkian was in my backyard. So I was a part of a number of demonstrations against Kevorkian. And then my son and I, when he was 16 and he's 37 now, went to Princeton to demonstrate against Peter Singer. And Teddy has grown up all his life seeing Peter Singer as the enemy, and knows exactly what Peter Singer stands for and has told lots of people about it. And they find it very amazing that a young man with Down syndrome who shouldn't even know who Peter Singer is can articulately explain why this person is an enemy to his very existence. And Joan.
Yeah, I spoke already though.
Oh, I thought it was Ellen. Okay, Ellen.
Hi, let's see, hold on. I'm Ellen Lee and I'm in the Boston area, and I got involved after I met John Kelly several years back when there was a ballot proposal to try to pass this in Massachusetts, which got defeated, fortunately, but it's was tried again this last year, and they're raring to go this coming legislative session. So just trying to do what I can to be involved and try to help in the effort. I was supposed to pass it to someone. Let's see. How about Norm?
Like Susan, I first came across the issue with Dr. Kevorkian and the actions by ADAPT to confront what he was doing. But there was also a case, I was working for Michigan Protection and Advocacy at the time, and there was a case involving an effort to get a court judge, a probate judge, to order the removal of a food tube from a fellow down in southern Michigan who had been in a railroad accident so that he would starve to death. And the point of that was he was living in a rehab facility, and his days were mostly centered around watching television and looking around outside and watching other people play games. And the primary deal of it was the idea that he was not, his quality of life was so terrible that his wife and daughter wanted him to die off. And there were interesting sides to that, because the railroad train accident had resulted in a large settlement which was paying for his care, and the only way that the wife and the daughter could get the money is if he died. And so that taught me the extent to which, and the kind of the complexity of assisted suicide and all the different ways that it, even if there is no legislation, all the different ways that it plays into the decisions that families and other people make in regard to the lives of people with disabilities. And who hasn't done it yet? I'm not, okay. Derek.
Hello, thanks Norm, and thanks Susan for having me. I'm from Ireland. At the moment, there's a bill going through the Parliament. It's got past 2 stages, and if it gets past this 3rd stage, it'll bring in assisted suicide and euthanasia in limited form here in Ireland. I don't really think I'm a fully fledged euthanasia or anti-assisted suicide activist at the moment. I'm more of a mental health activist, and I just want to know if the I mean, the title of the webinar is assisted suicide and with the idea of depression being a reason for that. Now I'm not diagnosed depressed, but I have a mental health condition, so I wonder, is there any leeway at that? I'm very concerned about it because for example, I do well in my mental health condition for the diagnosis I am, but a lot of people are very ostracized by society with the same diagnosis. And I think it's simplistic to generalize along the lines of it. I do quite well. I've held down a job for decades, and just to mention another thing was I had a relationship with a girl for about 10 years, but if you backtrack a good few decades, she was in a coma, and the doctor says you
Hey,
turn
Philip,
off
I'm
the
on
life
it if you
support.
want to come.
But she made a full recovery of disability, but I found her a very interesting person. She was wonderful. So can I pass to Vicky, please?
Hi, my name is Vicky.
If you want to, Vicky, or does anyone?
Sure. My name is Vicky Warfield. I heard about this meeting through a friend, and I'm just really, I've worked in kind of mental health activism and sort of, patient rights and psychiatric survivor movement, and try to have a newsletter that I kind of circulate with just kind of keeping people up to date on issues affecting the rights of people labeled with mental diagnoses. And so I'm just here to learn and just see, it seems like a really important discussion, and I'm mostly here just to, see what I can learn. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Want to pick somebody to go next?
I'll go next. My name is Tim Nolan. I've had family situations. My mother had a pacemaker for 20 plus years, and she died Halloween of 2012. But just a couple of years before that, I was with her at doctor's appointments, and she told her cardiologist, said, I'm so depressed, I wish I were dead. And he said, Julie, Dr. Kevorkian is out of prison now. And he said, Mom, I'll make a deal. I'll go to Oregon with you, and I'll stay alongside while he does his procedures. But anyway, I am pro-life. That's why I'm so adamantly opposed to war. And I look at quality of life. But anyway, Mom, coming up on the first part of October of 2012, I got her in assisted living. She was there only 3.5 days. They gave her a fentanyl patch. I found out later on. But she went into renal failure, and I got her in the United Hospital, and we got her in the palliative care. My brother was in town. And she started crying, said, my boys do care about me. Let's look for quality of life. And this is something that still is between the doctor and the patient, is like that priest in the center of the attorney and the client. And it's just something, these medical devices, just like this pandemic now, I just tracking that, and I have different ones that come under that web. And when they get them in the hospital, they get them on a ventilator, and that's what there is their demise. But some of these people are trying to, there's only one ultimate authority. And it's just something I also, I've worked in behavioral health, and I worked with the vets. That was most gratifying in my work in behavioral health. And we had a support group with Candlelight, and we got the intimacy going and the trust level going. And these people were burying their souls, some going back to Vietnam. And speaking of Vietnam, my brother was boots on the ground. And he called me last year, day after my birthday, March 22nd. He wanted to give me an update. He was combat engineering, and I know his situation. He's literally dying. And he said, Judy, his wife, she looks like she's about 200 years old. Then he started crying. He said, Heather, my niece, he said, Dad, they had to shave her hair. She's got all these multiple tumors. That's all from Agent Orange to all that's passed through his blood into Judy, and then my niece, Heather. but it's just something, it's just, we're in a biochemical warfare, and the military industrial complex has been doing that, operating that for about the early 50s. But it's just is really, we've got to start dialoguing. The medicated military, Prozac, I have that on one of my blogs. That's a secret weapon. Prozac long-term either become homicidal or suicidal. That's why vets are taking their life in their hands. About, I think the rate was at one time about 22 a day. But big pharma, that's legalized. They kill more people every year than the mob used to do back in whatever. But this is a starting point. We can dialogue, and I don't know. I have my medical directives, but still, if they would call the paramedics, they have to do their thing. But anyway, I had a heart attack October 9th, 2015. I was only in the hospital 2 days. I have defied death twice. October 9th, 1960, a near fatal car accident. 55 years later, that heart attack. But I'm still a work in progress. I've been part of the recovery community personally since January 11th, 1971. And I was a mortician for 20 years. Buried a lot of doctors' mistakes. But anyway, I learn more by listening than I do by talking. When I'm talking, I'm telling you something you already know. But when I listen, I'm learning something new about you folks. But it's just, this is a starting point. We can dialogue and come up with some ideas and leading the solutions.
Got a few others. Sally?
Hello,
Oh,
I'm joining you from Aloha, Oregon.
just,
Can you hear me?
yes.
So are we just introducing each other?
Just introduce just your name and a few lines about who you are, how you're connected to assisted suicide, if you are.
Well, my name, as it shows, is Sally Reed. I have a son who was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic at 16. He's been in and out of institutions, does not like being on medication. And when he goes off, he's worse each time. He is currently living with me and has requested doctor-assisted suicide many times, and feels like in the midst of his worst times that he would want that. And he feels that the Oregon law should be changed to accommodate that. He doesn't feel like he has any hope for the future. He's on disability. He can't work. He's choosing not to medicate or get in a program. And of course, I don't want to see that for him. But I have to tell you, in the midst of some of his worst despair and trauma, I wish that for him, because I've had suicide in my family and it's not a pretty sight. And it leaves the family feeling horrible and wondering why it happened. So part of me really would like that for him, because he has no relationships. I'm really his last relative that stays in his life, and that's even tentative at the moment. So anyway, I was just interested to hear what was going to be talked about today, but I do believe maybe there needs to be a twist to that for people who have extreme mental health situations. It's not what I would want, but that's what he would want. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
David?
Hi, can you hear me all right? Can you guys hear me all right? Yeah. Okay. I live in Pueblo, Colorado, actually, and I was attempted suicide back when I was 16. Then I found a news group on the internet called and their whole deal was like a pro-choice kind of thing, suicide where you.
You're fading in and out.
Let me get my headphones. All right. Sorry.
All right, how's that?
Much better.
Okay, this was back in the 90s, back in 1995, and I don't know if you all are familiar with Usenet, but there was this group called Alt Suicide Holiday, which was like a pro-choice discussion group where people could share how they were feeling without, the whole policy was you're not allowed to report somebody to have them institutionalized because it's a pro-choice community. So people were a lot more able to share about how they were feeling because they didn't have a fear of being put into an institution. So I think that really helped me to actually be in a situation where I actually was able to work through my issues without actually, wanting to kill myself or try again or whatever. So, and then also at one point I had this was back in 1997. I had a neighbor of mine, he called a suicide hotline. And then they were planning on putting him in an institution. They had sent the hotline was going to take him to send somebody to take him to the hospital. He didn't want to go to the hospital. So we actually, they were going to send somebody to come and get him. So we actually drove him away from the apartment complex so that the police would not be able to come and take him to the hospital. And then so we just were talking with him about how he was feeling. And while we were gone, the police broke into his apartment and to try and look for him. And so when we came back the next day, they had to deal with that. So.
Thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kelly Buckland. I'm with the National Council on Independent Living, and I just saw this advertised and wanted to join to see what I knew Anita and John Kelly were going to be doing this, so I joined to join the conversation. We have had a long-standing position opposing assisted suicide at Nickel, and I have personally as well, because shortly after I got my disability, when I returned home after rehab, got very depressed and tried to commit suicide, and didn't work, and I was really thankful about that. So never thought about it since.
Laura, I think you're the last one.
Well, we haven't heard from Rick and Lee. Ellen, have we?
We heard from Ellen early on, I think.
Okay. Did we hear from Rick?
No, but yes, Rick needs to jump in.
Join us, Rick. Maybe he's away.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm Laura Frankel.
Sorry, I thought I had unmuted. I'm Rick.
Oh.
I'm in Salem, Oregon. I came to find out what you were talking about. It was an interesting title for a webinar. I have my own history with suicide attempts and with suicidal thoughts and suicide in the family, including my daughter. But I don't have any particular, I have no expertise or knowledge about the specific topic today. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll introduce myself. I'm Laura Frankel. I'm Susan's sidekick for the past 20 years or whatever it's been. And I'm with an organization called Michigan Arts Access. And our goal is to make the arts and cultural accessible to everyone. And I'm in Detroit, so, and the only connection is that I've seen Dr. Kevorkian at the Royal Oak Post Office a couple times. That's as close as I got, thank goodness. Well, welcome, everybody. I'm interested in listening.
So I think you're up, John. And those who don't know, John Kelly is part of Not Dead Yet for quite some charge of what's happening in the New England area, and has his own organization out of Boston, and has been a firestorm in this movement for quite some time now. And he's going to talk to us about the laws that are related to assisted suicide and how they're impacting people with disabilities, God, I can't get that word out, more so than others. And what you can do about that.
Okay.
Anita has just arrived. Yay.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm not actually doing all that well and dealing with my mom passed away on Monday. So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
thank you. So,
If you
once again, I'm sorry that I'm late.
Well,
Oh,
if you want to
Anita.
pass on today, we understand that.
Anita, this is Elaine. Oh, my heart is
I'm
really.
sorry I didn't hear you.
Oh, honey. This is Elaine. Oh my.
Hi.
There are no words. I know you're devastated.
Yeah, to think I would
And
even
Anita,
have to
if you don't want to do it tonight, I understand. I'm sure
No,
John can
no,
handle it.
I'm sorry. This is something that I committed to and, my health and all. So thank you everyone for your condolences and support.
Could we just have a moment to send prayers to Anita and also to the spirit of her mother?
John, you want to start us off?
Blessings to all who are grieving. There's a lot of us right now.
Thank you.
Okay. Kind of hard to start after that. I think with COVID-19 and the impact it's had on disabled people, all marginalized people, it's been very difficult. Many of us have been stuck in the house for many months, and I have, been delayed in getting things I need, like a new wheelchair cushion. Got pushed back almost a year because of COVID, and which means that I've mostly been in bed during that time. And then it's hard. It's hard to be an advocate, an activist against assisted suicide because we go up against this death drive that, as someone said, they want to ration healthcare. They want us to die. They think we might be better off dead. And that's, the name of our group, Not Dead Yet, basically is the rejoinder to that death command. It's like, no, we're not dead yet. And people may know the little part of Monty Python and the Holy Grail from which the name comes. It was during the Black Death, and a man is pushing a cart through the mud, shouting, "Bring out your dead! Bring out your dead!" And a young man pushes his father out, and the father says, "But I'm not dead." And and the son's like, "Oh, you will be soon. You will be." And they go back and forth, and finally the driver, pusher of the push cart, uh, analogy being the doctor, hits him over the head with a stone and says, "Now you are dead." And we are the older man fighting for our right to live, even though many people, many powerful forces in society are saying that we are already dead, we should be dead, we'd be better off dead, and our suicidal impulses get reinforced and propagated, like a movie that came out recently, Me Before You, which it's like they love my disability as the poster child for suicide over life. And, it's always a white guy. They want to make sure that no one could say it's that racism is going on or anything. And it's this determination to die rather than be dependent on other people. And like Kelly, I became disabled at the age of 20, in my case, at the age of 26. And I was raised upper middle class white, and I had and really still have an orientation to life of achievement, independence, autonomy, and definitely felt less than dignified, and was suicidal for a few years. And I don't know about Kelly's story, but for me, it was meeting other disabled people that turned my life around. As long as I thought of myself as a loser individual in a sea of non-disabledness, I I could be suicidal and have it make sense. But then once other people, came into the picture, and especially people who were born disabled or became disabled very shortly after birth, really taught me that, what's your problem? You are what you are. And we have just as much right to air and water and food as everyone else. And, in terms of the movements going on, whether it's Black Lives Matter or disabled people fighting against, COVID, COVID prejudices, we're making a demand to be recognized as full equals, as full human beings. And it's a fight that for disabled people, for people with lived experience of a mental health diagnosis, trauma, and addiction, we think we might be making progress, and then with something like COVID-19, which tears off the surface sheen or patina of progress, and we see the naked bloodthirst among elites to have us die. And I would say specifically to Sally, I am so sorry that both you and your son, have been living this difficulty. And when people feel alone, we can be very tempted by suicide. And I hope that he can find community somehow, because I think that that's the answer for all of us, and that the demographic pushing for and using assisted suicide, namely upper middle class, white people with a smattering of professional class, Black and brown people, are the ones pushing for it. And for this group of people, autonomy is everything. And being able to do one's own personal care is everything. Whereas people who are more sensible, I would argue, Black and brown people, working class and poor people of all colors, believe that life is about connection, about family, about reciprocal obligation and mutual aid. And I see this as a prime example of white supremacy, in that a group of people who already have a terrible suicide problem, whites commit suicide at twice the rate of Blacks and Latinos. And assisted suicide is really just an extension of that suicidal impulse. And, the thing is that suicide is a quote unquote successful suicide can't be treated, but depression can. And I hope, Sally, that you and your son are able to find him community and whatever methods might work out.
Agreed 100% with you.
So
He's just been resistant, yeah.
Oh, yes, I can understand that. So I think people, pretty much know about Not Dead Yet's origin. We emerged in the social context of Jack Kevorkian, who was killing disabled people, and the conflation or mixing together of disabled people and terminally ill people, that the media presented Kevorkian's victims as terminally ill, and newspapers continue to spout that line despite the challenges that we've launched against them. And but in reality, more than 2/3 of Kevorkian's victims were not terminal but disabled. The typical portrait of one of his victims would be a depressed middle-aged woman with a recent life upset, like a divorce, who has a chronic illness. And there were a few people who had no illness or disease at all. So assisted suicide in the US is aimed at first people who are designated terminal, meaning 6 months or less to live. And the safeguards, say, oh, two doctors have to agree, but prognosticating death is an impossibility, and 12 to 15% of people who enter hospice for their 6-month benefit graduate from hospice. And Anita can tell the story of her mom when she begins talking. So, and as the Oregon reports show, the end of life concerns all have to do with psychological distress, loss of autonomy, loss of abilities, loss of dignity. Loss of dignity is, loss of self and peer respect because of dependence. In some communities, you never lose the respect of your family. You are always esteemed. And we have an age-hating movement in this country also, I would argue, generated out of the upper middle classes. But, especially in Black and Brown communities, grandparents are revered and people take care of them. And then we have something like feeling like a burden. And as Brian Shea of Empower in Massachusetts says, feeling like other people would be better off if you weren't alive is the classic thought pattern of someone who's suicidal. And here, the people pushing for this bill want it to be law that if you feel like a burden, or if people make you feel like a burden, or if you don't want to use up all your money, you want to leave some to your family, or you don't want to go to a nursing home, or you don't want your family to have to care for you. And it's very easy to feel like a burden. And what proponents do is they make it all about an individual making a free choice, as if life is just a smorgasbord and everyone is equal with equal rights. And it's just a travesty, a pathetic a pathetic reason. Let's see here. We've got the problem of insurance deciding who gets covered. There have been cases where people get denied coverage, but of course, assisted suicide will always be covered. Perhaps the most radical move these bills make is to redefine depression. Depression is rational. And the count in Massachusetts, everyone has to see a so-called counselor for a one-off visit. And I think only 5% of psychiatrists in Oregon thought that they could diagnose depression in one session. But even if the counselor suspects depression, they can still sign off, because the counselor is set to determine, quote, the patient is not suffering from a psychiatric or psychological disorder or depression causing impaired judgment. So it separates depression from judgment. And so if the counselor supports assisted suicide, and I can't imagine any counselors getting referral who too often reject people for assisted suicide, they're going to use a substituted judgment. Well, if I was in this person's position, I would want to die too. The associations of social workers all support assisted suicide by huge margins. And I was just stunned by this because if there's any group of professionals who should be aware of the social context of suffering, it should be social workers. But when I spoke to the Massachusetts chapter of the NASW, one member of the board said, John, when we think about assisted suicide, we think about ourselves. And that I think is true of pretty much everyone pushing for it. And the tactic is called a bait and switch, in which they say, oh, for people who are in excruciating pain and suffering, we have to have this option. But it turns out it's really about disability and not wanting to be dependent on others. One of the reasons that we support Medicare for all is that it would come with a guaranteed funded home care option so that people don't have to choose between a nursing home or being a burden on their families. So a couple of years ago, Massachusetts mental health activist Ruthie Poole wrote in a Boston Globe op-ed that absolute hopelessness and seeing no way out are common feelings in severe depression. Personally, as someone who has been suicidal in the past, I can relate to the desire for a painless and easy way out. However, depression is treatable and reversible. Suicide is not. Let's see.
At one
And
time, I remember that they said that the main reason, the number one reason people requested assisted suicide in Oregon was because people didn't want anyone to be wiping their butts. Does that remain to be one of the primary reasons?
it's not said so frankly, but yes, there was a great article in the Washington Post a few years ago in which it quoted Barbara Coombs Lee as saying that incontinence, that a woman she knew, incontinence was worse than any of the pain. And I think you might be referring to the famous quote from Janet Good, Susan, who told the Washington Post 20 years ago, it's not about pain, it's about people's pride and dignity. They say they've had enough when they need their husband or wife to wipe their butts. And people have their pride, people have their dignity. And our argument, which I think is the human argument, is that we're all human, regardless. Incontinence is a ubiquitous in childhood, not uncommon through life, and then increasing as we get older. I mean, just look at the market for Depends and panty liners and but I think that the issue comes up most when people can't control their own incontinence. And it's when someone else needs to help and people feel undignified. And I remember that when I was first disabled, I resented saying the word thank you, and on my anniversary, I wanted one day where I didn't have to say thank you. And then I think, through meeting a more diverse group of people, especially Black people that I worked with around wheelchair access issues, that, the real grounding feature of reality is gratitude. and that to be thankful for what we have, we're alive, and all the people who support us. And I thank yous are free, and I don't feel diminished at all in saying that. So, I think I'll put a period on it there and pass it on to my colleague and friend Anita.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm Anita Cameron. I'm Director of Minority Outreach for Not Dead Yet, and been around almost since the beginning. But one thing that really cemented for me was I got a call in June of 2009 telling me that if I wanted to see my mom alive, that I would make my way to Seattle, Washington within the next couple of days. And so I did, and my mom rallied. She didn't die, but she was still quite ill. She was in the final stages of COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and the doctor said that she was in the process of dying. She was in Washington State at the time, and just about the time I got that call, Washington State had enacted its assisted suicide law. So my mom eventually went to hospice, and the doctors kept telling us that her body had begun the process of dying, and that she was dying. And so after 6 months of this, and 6 months is usually at that you graduate hospice, if you will. After 6 months and after continuously being told that her body had begun the process of dying, my mom decided to go home to Colorado to die. And so I'm in New York, and we got together with folks in Colorado and folks in Washington State, got her a place, and basically waited for her to die. But she did not die. She, 6 weeks later, was in Washington, D.C., being arrested for nonviolent civil disobedience, fighting for civil rights of people with disabilities. And she remained in her own place, fairly active. And we just lost her on Monday, almost 12 years later. Had she, and she had her bouts of depression, had she asked at any of that time in Washington State for the suicide drugs, she would have gotten it because she was considered terminal. And we wouldn't have had almost 12 more years of my mom and her tenacity and badassery and her fighting for disability rights and justice. So, doctors make some mistakes. They make them quite a bit. And so that's one of the reasons. That was a really big reason for me, getting deeply involved in something that I was already passionate about. um, we have hidden in a lot of these laws because they follow the state of Oregon's laws, that if you have a condition that's chronic, but it's terminal without medications, if you lose access to your medications, and diabetes was mentioned as an example, if you lose access to your insulin, whether from then, if you're in a state with assisted suicide, you can then ask for the assisted suicide drugs because your condition has now turned terminal. So imagine, insurance, snatches you of your meds. We hear this a lot with people with pain meds. We hear this a lot with people having to ration their insurance. And to think that, you can then ask to die because insurance took your meds. So that's something, to think about as well, hidden in those laws that people don't really know about. So yeah, I'm a pause there, see if anybody has questions, you know, um, for me or for John.
You can jump in if you've got a question or a small group. I've got one. I heard that they're starting to change, some of these newer laws are changing sort of the way they describe the prognosis of terminal illness to include more people. It's not sort of it's a change of words, but a change of interpretation of what that means.
Well, there's I guess you could call it a gradual expansion, in that in recent reports we see chronic diseases like diabetes, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, diseases not usually thought of as terminal. And as Anita alluded to, you can become terminal if you can't afford your treatment, if you stop your treatment, or if, really for any reason that you somehow, if you're diabetic and you stop taking your insulin, you can be terminally ill. And there have been lots of proposals for including depressed people, especially so-called, long-term depressed people. And, I know someone in Massachusetts who was suicidal for 30 years because he'd been so terribly abused. And again, it was when he found community and, other people who had suffered such trauma. And he's got a whole new lease on life, teaching about trauma right now. And, it's, I was on the liberal left and believed in social justice, and I was wondering what group or cause I should work on, and the universe decided to give me a good cause to work for. And yeah, I'll just leave it there. Anita?
Yeah, I think you I think you said it, you know, all, John, these, um, when the Oregon Division of Health was responding to Mr. Stahl of Sweden, they were saying that the law was not exclusive, it was inclusive. So it was meant to cover a big tent. And so that's where the whole widening of the definition of terminal, you know, of people either losing their access to or saying, I'm not going to deal with this anymore, has come from. And that's, you know, that's really a scary part that it's hidden in there. And, you know, and yeah, and people talk about safeguards, you know, can there be safeguards? There can never be, because you can get out of, you know, everything. These bills are designed for that. They're immunity bills. So yeah.
Yeah, this
So,
this is Elaine Kolb. Uh, Part of what always freaks me out so much is that the protections in the bills are only for the doctors and the pharmacists and family members. There's no protection for the individual, because there's no records kept. There's Once the poison has been prescribed, it can be anywhere. Even the wrong person could get a hold of it. How would they? There's no protection and there's no record of whether or not the person administered to themselves or somebody slipped it to them. I mean, there's no way to make it. It's just horrifying. And I've been the person who was at the hospital with somebody fighting for their lives and had medical people saying, "Don't you think it's time to let him go?" And it's like, she's fighting for her life. She's trying to live. If you're not going to help her fight for her life, I want a different doctor. A lot of people don't have somebody like that with them.
Right.
And
can I
right
ask?
now, especially,
Can I
a
ask a
lot of
question?
our people with disabilities are not allowed to have anybody with them at all. And it's just the degree to which privileged, non-disabled people will go to decide that our lives are not worth living and that we should be dead because they want the right to assisted suicide. So kill yourself. It's not illegal. But don't kill me. Don't kill my friends. Don't kill my family. Don't kill people that want to live, that are trying to live, by not providing the things that make it possible to have a life worth living.
Can I
Like
speak
freedom.
to? Can I speak to also has some reference to your point, Elaine, that they don't think it's worth it for us to live. Like I admit now, I'm a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic and have been for the last 25 years. It's well controlled with medication, and I choose to stay on the medication. But my point is that the awareness of what a schizophrenic is, never mind what a paranoid schizophrenic is in this part of the world in Ireland, is so slim and narrow. I've had the experience of, I was asked when I said I was schizophrenic, it says, and then I was asked, how many times have you attempted suicide? So it's almost like they're putting up flags and stuff, and celebratory flags to when they hear that I'm attempting suicide, because well, from what I see, it's almost like it's been the awareness of schizophrenics has been kept that narrow and slim because eventually people will get tired of all this talk about suicide because that's how it's presented. It's only suicide attempters, and they don't understand the full picture, and it just leads to the fact that I have to live a lie in the sense I'm never understood. I have to conform to something else, maybe a suicide attempter or alien believer or whatever, in order to be accepted by society. And when you live a lie, there's very little dignity in that. Now, I admit I'm well away from Egypt in the proverbial sense, but don't forget Ireland is going the same way. It's having the assisted bill coming in, assisted euthanasia bill, and from my perspective, I'm a little bit concerned because in Ireland, the psychiatrists, when they bring in the client or into the system, a lot of the time they take away their rights to choose for themselves. A good proportion of the time, 30-40% of clients. And if that's the case, if they cannot choose for themselves and it's left up to some other signatory, it's demeaning, and I feel vulnerable because of it. So if I could ask John and Anita the informational side of it, I mean, it's very hard for me even to tell someone what my condition is in this country because the shutters go down and there's judgment, and it's very much preventing that, and it hurts. I'm emotionally hurt by it. That I cannot be understood as I am, and I have to lead a lie. Just in that, what's understood about my condition isn't the truth about it. But I know it's a small percentage of the population, but if there could be some kind of attempt at promoting or explaining or going into depth what it actually is, instead of the narrow band of what I think they're more interested in the market sustainability of the presentation of or representation of schizophrenia than anything else. They don't tell the truth. John and Lisa.
Ellen,
I
you've
don't
been wanting to jump in.
Yeah, I don't want to interfere with what anyone else had to say, but I was struck by overall people sharing about the preciousness of life, and from what Anita said about her mom, and I'm so very sorry about your mom, and I'm so very glad that you did have almost 12 extra years with her, for her, with her tenacity and her badassery, as you mentioned, and her ability to carry on doing justice work, and what John so eloquently talked about in terms of, the need for community, and about possibilities, like, people don't realize what meaning and purpose we can have in our life, whether it's because we're disabled from physical or emotional issues. And so, society, I think a lot of what we're fighting against is society's ableism as well as our own internalized ableism. And I think that that's something that is just not discussed enough, brought up, put a spotlight on enough, and how that dovetails with, the costs of healthcare and the costs of home and community-based services, and versus the cheap fix of assisted suicide. So I think that all of these things need to be really brought out to the fore, and the need for palliative care. It's almost as though people that are fighting against this suicide, pro-assisted suicide legislation, it's like we're causing people with cancer to suffer or something like that. It's almost like, it's just a strange position to be in. And So I just think it's a really important fight to be in, and I appreciate everyone's input about this. And I also wanted to say quickly that Anita said, doctors make mistakes, but also what we're learning more and more too is just ableism is in the medical community, like John said about the social workers, that we're thinking about ourselves. Well, and physicians think about, that's not the quality of life I want, so looking at our lives from their perspective without any ability to be able to adjust, like it all takes us time to adjust to our circumstances too, and appreciating the preciousness of life in all of its forms. And no matter how we live, like if we have a why, if we have a purpose, if we have a meaning and are part of community, we can still have a good quality of life. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellen and Derek. Something I learned from the autistic community is, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person.
Mm-hmm.
And the same would be true of a spinal cord injured person or someone with any diagnosis of mental illness. And people with intellectual disabilities and with mental health diagnoses are still open season for being mocked. And you can't count how many times the times progressives on YouTube will say that such and such is insane or crazy, or people just don't have the language to express themselves without being ableist. And there's social roles that everyone can take up, and it's unfortunate that in a utilitarian profit-making society that whole groups of people get pushed to the side, and we get told that maybe we should just be better off dead. Anita?
I think you've said it, John. Excuse me. I don't know if I can add anything, more to it. I mean, assisted suicide it's a deadly form of discrimination, and COVID-19 has certainly, it has laid bare that racial disparities in healthcare, medical, disability discrimination, in healthcare, and you hear of compassionate choices wanting COVID-19 to be, a terminal condition that's eligible for assisted suicide. And that's, pretty scary, especially as we're seeing the vaccines and everything coming out, and all. And so, yeah, it's Compassionate Choices has a number of states that they are making it a priority to push assisted suicide laws in. Certainly New York is one of them. And so we definitely have to be vigilant. We have to be ever so watchful of, when these bills are coming up, because I can't imagine death being on the menu of healthcare options. That's just frightening, and it turns suicide prevention on its head, you know, in a number of ways. So this is definitely something we have to fight against.
I think Vicky was going to put her hand up. Did you want to say something, Vicky?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm kind of mulling over sort of a lot of what I've heard tonight, and it's really made me think. And I kind of wanted to comment. I was especially struck by something John Kelly said about talking to the National Association of Social Workers, and they were saying, you know, well, we're talking about ourselves, and you know, especially the issue of, you know, well, that they were saying personally they wouldn't want to go on living with issues of like incontinence and loss of autonomy. And it just reminded me of a group I was part of where someone said, you know, write down all the ways that your disability, you know, limits you, and all the ways that you know, what condition you have limit you. And we did. And then, you know, she said, no, okay, now look at that. And how much of that is your condition? And how much of that is, how much of that would go away if society provided, you know, the accommodations for you to participate just as well as anyone else, and didn't, you know, discriminate, you know, didn't put any stigma on it. And said, you know, so how much disability is due to your condition, and how much of it is you know, what society puts on you, you know, society's failing. And it kind of seems like that becomes a pretty big issue in assisted suicide. It sounds like people have so stigmatized the idea of disability and the idea of relying on someone else, or accepting help from other people, or needing help, that people are feeling like their lives are no longer worth living just because they don't want to, you know, be part of a stigmatized group where, you know, that requires, you know, they wouldn't want to need assistance. And that seems like, I mean, I'm sorry, maybe this is like, you know, kind of an old subject for a lot of you, but it's kind of just connecting the dots for me, seeing assisted suicide as sort of internalized depression, as well as kind of a scary, you know, the consequences for healthcare and the consequences for discrimination, but also just seeing the internalized aspect of it. And I guess I was kind of wondering if either John or Anita could kind of speak to their view of that, or if I'm kind of seem like I'm on the right track, or interpreting you guys, you know, the right way.
John, you're on mute.
Okay, I'll go first, and then Anita can follow. I was very, very upset about incontinence when I first became disabled, and I wrote about it for the Ragged Edge online, called Incontinence, like 20 years ago or so, and it would make me suicidal, and it was really a very genial, friendly, people-loving character from Barbados who educated me that it's no big deal. He, at the age of 10, was helping his 50-year-old grandmother, you know, help her poop. He would hold her up over a bucket. And, you know, she lost no dignity in his eyes or in the village culture. And that, and in that article, I compared incontinence to something that really does interfere with my life, which is temperature regulation. Spinal cord injured people, our temperatures go all over the place. And I said that, you know, it interferes with my life and makes me uncomfortable, and it put me in the hospital once. But if I talk anything about it, people have no reaction. But incontinence, everyone knows what that means. And if people have had incidences where they pooped or peed their pants, they remember it. It's a great topic to get a non-disabled person talking about the time they pooped their pants in public and the shame and horror of it all. And I think internalized oppression is half of it, and the other half is the pressure and coercion of a social group that agrees with you. In upper white middle class land, if people are horrified to look at you and they whisper behind your back and they sigh about you, and everyone's heard people say, oh, it's for the best. My grandmother was put in a nursing home against her wishes, and she was high and mighty, thought she was better than other people based on social class. And those working class people made her life pretty miserable. And they would drug her and restrain her. So she starved herself to death. And, that's the setup. And the answer, unfortunately for this country, it seems we always rely on Black people and Black women especially to save us from the worst parts of ourselves, the worst parts of our white selves, and learn that every life is valuable, everyone's got dignity, and that what really matters in life is community, solidarity, mutual aid, and not individual achievement up until you're 100 years old. Anita?
Hi, yeah, as I was thinking about, one of the things that Compassionate Choices talks a lot about is pain and the fear of it, and why people would ask for assisted suicide, which is actually not even in the top 5 of, but I will tell you, as someone who lives with pain, every waking hour of my life, I would want access to better and effective pain treatment. I why would I want to die? Um, and if that's palliative care, and palliative care is not only for people who are dying, but why not better access to that rather than seems like the whole expedient thing of making people die. It seems like it's more expensive for people to live, and for a lot of, especially for the insurance companies, it comes down to the bottom line of profits over people. And it shouldn't be, the scary thing is that this is going to become a culture. The whole death thing, the whole first it's our right to die, our duty to die, we're going to be in some odd, type of future where this is normalized, and that can't be allowed.
And yet it's become normalized that we're deprived of the pain medication that we need. I mean, I've been taking Narcos for 35 years for a spinal cord injury, and I can't get them anymore. And they don't look at it that, you know, I've been taking it for 35 years and not been addicted, but it's kept me pain-free and it's kept me mobile and it's done so much for me. So I used to be able to walk a little, not much, but I used to be able to walk a little. I can't walk at all anymore. And part of that is not having access to the pain medication. The pain from walking is too severe to even manage standing for more than a second or two. And that causes tremendous depression. And, you know, it all just is, it's a circle, you know, they take one thing away from you and then they take something else away from you. And it's like a plan to make you want to die sometimes. I mean, I faced last year that they were going to amputate my leg. And at the last minute, somebody said, I think we can save it. And they did. But I don't think they were, I mean, I really don't think that the initial doctor was trying because I was disabled and why does she need her leg? Let her go.
People have such powerful stories of interacting with doctors. I was hospitalized 3 years ago with necrotizing pneumonia, and you know, the doctor asked my brothers about my quality of life, those 3 words that try to send so many of us to early graves. And, you know, wouldn't have asked that if I'd been non-disabled. And, you know, and just to emphasize that assisted suicide for some people means that people with the same conditions that are being approved for assisted suicide will receive worse and less treatment than they do now, because people will have internalized the belief that, oh, you know, you can't feed yourself. Well, you know, maybe that's a good reason to die. We have people forming who want to do advanced directives that if they need to be spoon-fed, they want to be killed. And you know, just this frantic attempt to maintain control at all costs. And you know, people would rather risk losing years of life than you know, than feel vulnerable.
One of the things that they're doing at my hospital now before every doctor's appointment, and I haven't decided how I feel about it yet, but they're doing this depression survey. They ask 10 questions about, I mean, they don't call it a depression survey, but that's what it is. And you're supposed to rate how often you felt this way in the last 2 weeks. And, you know, you get a score of a certain amount and then you're basically considered suicidal. And I can't answer the questions correctly. I mean, I do on occasion. When I do, then they want to send me to a hospital immediately, you know, and, you know, when I've done that, I've said, you know, I'm disabled. Of course I'm depressed. You know, it's a natural part of dealing with it. And every day I wake up and I deal with the depression and I say, I want to continue on. And so my depression isn't terminal. My depression is something that helps me focus and carry on and find purpose. And I don't think the medical profession has any kind of positive regard for how depression can motivate you. That it's not always a debilitating factor that makes you want to die. I mean, it may make you want to die in some ways, but in other ways, it's like, okay, I don't want to feel this way.
I can, this is John. I can agree to that. I found it pretty depressing for people to just come out and admit that, yeah, assisted suicide's all about disability. That's why we want to die. We don't want to be like you. And, just that stark confrontation with people who, really would rather that we be dead. And it's very difficult. And then not getting support from other disabled people or other progressive people. And, that's sometimes the hardest. And Anita, I know you could speak to that.
Yeah, this Anita, I think what boggles the mind the most is that the people that you would expect to be in the fight against assisted suicide are the ones who are so pro-assisted suicide. So your progressives and the like that seem to think that it's some sort of choice
Right.
when it actually is not really. What type of real choice is there, to be, convinced or coerced that you don't want to create a financial, burden. So you're going to go do this, or whatever. And so um, it seems so some of these are so outright egregious, I think, that they just all but come out and say, yeah, you guys should die. Um, it should be your duty, not just your right, and with, binding up the insurance, companies and all in it, it makes it even that more egregious and obscene.
So if people are riled up about this, what do they do? What kind of organizations are out there that they can become a part of, either virtually or what's happening that can help people find their voice?
Well, people could join the Not Dead Yet Facebook page. For example, there's also one in the UK. People can start to educate themselves and others, try out, arguments on people. And, it's very important to meet people where they're at. And, it's not a coincidence that proponents are always emphasizing pain and suffering and, implying that you're going to be alone with your misery, that to counteract that. And, as people used to say, just living with a disability is a radical act and is activism. And, we need to practice self-care. And, when bills come up in your legislature, to reach out for help. And, there's the Disability Rights Education Defense Fund. There's a page on assisted suicide, and there's all sorts of reading resources. There's a National Council on Disability report against assisted suicide that was issued last fall. And, to and for white people especially to really listen to people from diverse parts of society. You know, listen to what Black people have to say, and and not think you're better than other people. And you know, I found Anita very patient with me as I make white boomer mistake after mistake, because you know, I was effectively segregated from Black people from the moment I was born in a housing development that was exclusive to white people, to, you know, mostly white schools, and um, you know, but you know, to join in solidarity with anti-racist work, and to listen, learn, and maybe the hardest thing for educated white people to do is to be humble and to admit when we make mistakes.
This Anita, I would say, um, for I recently put out a post for Not Dead Yet on um, renewing my call for Blacks and people of color to join this fight, particularly um, Blacks, Latina community, indigenous communities, especially because we don't hear, you know, so much. And to know that, you know, certainly for Black people, assisted suicide is not our culture. You know, that's not our culture. Our culture is taking care, you know, of our own. Um, you know, our culture is about family and honoring our elders. Um, and so with the compassionate choices, making the inroads into the Black community that they've made, particularly in Maryland and some instances Massachusetts, it's really scary because um, we folks of color, particularly Black folks, we know of the things that's been done to us, the experimentations, the out and out medical discrimination. We know that certain medical fields were done on the backs of enslaved people. And so, you know, we know that our lives tend to be devalued by the medical profession, especially if we're poor, especially if we're disabled, especially if we're otherwise marginalized. So we really have to join the fight to say, you know, our lives are worth it, that our lives matter too. Um, and, you know, assisted suicide really for people of color is just another scourge of white supremacy. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that.
What do we say to people who say that people whose disabilities are so significant that they couldn't attempt a suicide on their own should have the equal right to suicide? And I've certainly heard that argument more than once, where people say that people with disabilities can be deprived of the choice. And, you know, and my response has always been, I don't think people would make that choice if they were receiving the services and were part of the community that they wanted to be. But I don't know if that's enough.
Well, you know, I would say that I think each of us in our heart of hearts reserves the right to end our own lives somehow. and that, you know, whether it's refusing food and liquids or some other measure. And I personally think that every suicide is a tear in the social fabric. It certainly can really rip apart families. But, you know, this right to death is not a right. It's an inevitability. And, you know, it's not a right that any human has ever fought for before. And, you know, what the right to die means is the right for wealthier, whiter people to get doctors to give them drugs, you know, and to call it a medical procedure to take away the stigma of suicide. So, you know, there's something called VSED, or voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, and that's available to just about everyone. And they can make you quote unquote comfortable while you're doing it. And that's how teenager Jerica Bolin, a Black disabled woman, a teenager, killed herself after her community raised $35,000 to throw her a quote unquote prom because she never had one, had never gone to one. And people described the whole story as heartwarming. And, you know, just that, you know, people think that disability and death are so adjacent to each other that they've already written us off as mostly dead. And so when we die, it's you'll get the "it's a blessing" crowd coming out.
So this is Laura Frankel. I have not had any connection with anyone who has committed suicide, but this whole discussion has made me get this file out that says medical durable power of attorney. I'm looking at, my husband and I created these forms July 8th of 2005. And I'm starting to read it now. And I'm saying, and it says that I am authorizing my patient advocate to make decisions that could result in my death by meaningful recovery. If I can't recover meaningfully, meaning I would be restored to a state of bodily health and mental awareness, including, among other things, the ability to care for myself and to interact with people and with my surroundings. So what you've been talking about this whole time are those conditions. So I'm thinking about, do I want to continue with this directive or not? Now, my husband died in 2016. He was 89 and he had diabetes and atrial fibrillation and everything. And he did, John, what you just said. He got to a point where he was in the hospital for 4 months and he decided he'd had it. So he stopped eating. It was like, you know, my time is up. I'm going to make this decision. So that's, you know, he made his own decision as far as that was, but every lawyer suggests that a person should have this medical durable power of attorney paper so that they can pass the decision on to someone else. Anyway, I don't know if there's any reaction to that.
Yeah, this is Elaine Kolb. Um, it's, I think, important. There's different places have different legal setups and stuff and use slightly different terminology. But I think it is very important for everyone to have it set up. In some places, it's called healthcare proxy, durable power of attorney. They have different terminology, different places. But if anybody gets in the situation where they cannot make decisions for themselves, it's important to have it set up so that someone you trust and have confidence in would have the authority to help make the decisions and would try to do it to the best of their ability to the way that you would want it. And in order for people to do that, you have to decide what it is you want somebody to do if you can't do it for yourself. So I think it's important to have those things. And if you don't, then it can just be left up to whoever in some cases it would be a family member. There's like a certain sequence of decision makers that are assigned. And if you're comfortable with your family and who would be in your family that would make that decision, that's one thing. But what if you're not? And that's what would happen if you don't make other arrangements. So that's why I think it is important, but I think it's also very helpful and healthy to think about those things, because that's part of, I think, the way that too many people in privileged situations or Western societies have like this kind of strange illusion about how much control we actually have. And when push comes to shove, you want somebody that's going to be there, that's going to try to act in your stead as you would want them to be acting. I have been in that position now a number of times for a number of different people. And it's a very difficult, stressful position to be in, because someone else's life is literally in your hands in terms of decision making and negotiation with sometimes very confusing and contradictory medical information. So this one tells you this, and this one tells you that, and this one tells you something else, and you're trying to figure it out, and you're still trying to factor in, what would this person want me to do? So it actually is a very healthy, helpful thing to spend the time to go over this, and not just with one person, but go over with whoever are the most essential people in your lives, so that a range of people know what it is you want and who is most likely to be the one that would be the best in your mind to make these decisions, and maybe with some backup people that would also be in the mix. Because it's actually better if it's not one person, but several people that would come in and together try to make sure that you are well cared for in the best way to give you the best possibility of getting the care that you want and need with the outcome that you would want. And in some cases, it has been that it's been my role to assist a person who, and this was with my sister Norma, she knew she was dying. She had had a major stroke. She had very major brain damage, was hemiplegic, was in terrific pain, and had difficulty speaking. And so there were people that thought that maybe she was not being sensible, that she wasn't in her right mind, because she did not want the surgery that they wanted her to have. She didn't want that. but she also had difficulty speaking. And if anybody has a speech difficulty, put under extreme pressure, then people can't talk at all. You know, it makes it almost impossible for someone with a speech difficulty to speak if they're under pressure. So anyway, so it became my job to settle it within myself that Norma was still there and that she was trying to express herself. And I've done this before with people who had speech difficulties and worked out how to get their message down and then across to others. So it really is important who is the person to make those kinds of determinations and assist the person if they can't speak for themselves.
And there may be nothing wrong with the document that you have. It may need to be simply the terms in it defined. My mom had one, and one of the things that I knew about my mom, so I knew it needed to be in there, was food and water is considered medication. And so I wanted to make sure that in her document, it said she would never be deprived of food and water, because that was the choice that she had to make. But I knew she didn't want to die that way. And so that was specifically in her documents, that was added in as a specific thing. So you can change how all those things are defined to make it fit what your perception of quality of life is.
This is Joan. I just want to add to this a little bit. I wrote my own. I started, you know, I started out with a basic advanced directive that was just very generic. And when I read it over, I realized this opens the door wide open for all kinds of interpretations. So I wrote a 5-page document spelling out all of my particularities and my concerns about the medical system, that I did not want to be a casualty of a throwaway society. And it's very, very detailed about as much as possible what I would want in that situation. Of course, you can never know until you're in that situation how you're going to be feeling. But I also I've also designated a team of 5 friends who are all my healthcare representatives. And I've laid it out in such a way that as much as possible, I want collective decision-making if I'm in a situation where I can't speak for myself, because they all know me and they know me very well. They're very close friends. And I've tried to make it so that they can all weigh in. And of course, I've said, you know, that if that's not possible, then there are a few people who are designated to be the decision makers. But it's a document that I spent quite a bit of time on, and I've discussed it in detail with all 5 of these people. And I really recommend doing something like that rather than filling out a generic advanced directive, because those generic advanced directives, at least in Connecticut, point you in the direction of no extraordinary measures. And everybody sort of signs off on that without really thinking what that actually means. So that's why I wrote my own, and I recommend that people do that. One of the issues we have here in Connecticut is that there's a representative who wants to pass a bill that you can't even get on Medicare or Medicaid or any private insurance unless you fill out an advanced directive. And that's very scary because of the way these advanced directives are worded. So I do really recommend writing your own, getting it notarized, and having the people involved all have copies of it.
Thank you, Joan. This is John. That said, it can be very helpful to really spell out what you would like. I mean, what I've authorized my healthcare proxy to do is basically to keep me alive at, at all opportunities.
Right.
And he also is someone who doesn't mind if people don't like him. It's not the healthcare proxy is not for the nicest person in your friendship network. It's for the person who doesn't care if people might think they're an asshole and a troublemaker, because the squeaky wheel really does get the needed medication.
You got it.
And as far as medical orders for life-sustaining treatment or physician orders for life-sustaining treatment, Diane Coleman, the founder of Not Dead Yet, she does not encourage that people fill these out, because these documents are so often misread, or the very existence of one may had EMTs and medical personnel assuming that the person doesn't want to be resuscitated, doesn't want to be ventilated. And so I have one because my medical practice came out and filled one for everyone like 10 or 12 years ago. And the criterion for inclusion in this was if a doc, can people mute, because we have a phone ringing. But well, I lost my train of thought, but
You were saying that everybody has to have the most because there's some criterion in your.
Oh, right. The criterion was if the doctor wouldn't be surprised if you died in the next year. And so what that means is, they'll go around and do everyone in a practice for medically fragile people. And I could imagine them doing it at any congregate care facilities. And they definitely want to encourage people to die.
Thank you, Joan and John. It's helpful.
Well, I
Were
asked
you
you
gonna-
guys to be available until 8, which it is now. So if you feel the need to leave, we greatly appreciate that you were here. But people are welcome to stay on as long as they want to talk. We're here.
I'm gonna need to go. I'm so glad to be able to be with you all. Hope to see you again.
Glad you were here.
Thank you.
Will you continue the conversation some other time too?
Well, we've
Yeah,
gotten a
Sister
number of
Anita, I'm
messages where
gonna-
people have actually asked.
Thank you, John and Anita.
Continue.
Thank you for having me. I'm definitely gonna have to go.
Need to take care of yourself as well as you can.
Thank you.
Take care, Anita. We'll be talking.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Good night,
night.
John.
Thanks so
Good
much.
night.
Good night, Anita. Love you.
Well, I have 10 minutes or so if anyone wants to hear any more out of me. But people might want to, people who haven't talked might want to talk, or the floor is open.
Mark, you never got a chance to say a word. Did you want to say anything?
He's on mute. Mark, you're on mute.
when I filled out my excuse me, when I filled out my paper for my PCA and caseworker help, I felt that some of the questions were is so demeaning, especially during this time of COVID. It's like for me, a lot of these people, if it's not written down in their book, they don't know how to deal with it. And I find that very frustrating.
Well, Mark, I agree with you. This is Elaine, and it's really great to see you. Keep your spirits up.
Well,
I remember our
I
time
have
in
to be honest,
Pennsylvania.
I just jumped over from another, I just got finished with my Wednesday night social group, and I got the email today, Elaine, which I thank you for sending me, and I was hoping I could catch part of this. I want you to know that I'm doing well, and my kitty's doing well. But one of the things I miss about one of the things I miss because of the COVID is being able to see a lot of people in person.
Yes.
And my joke is that when all this is said and done, whenever that may be, I'm gonna have to go to a COVID group I'm gonna have to go to a Zoom group to get released from Zoom. You know, how to survive without Zoom.
It's possible, I've heard.
We'll have to
I know.
We'll have to go through Zoom release.
Zoom Anonymous.
Well, if you
That's
want
what I was
to be
looking for.
notified of when we have our events, put your address in the chat, and then I'll put you on our calendar list so you know what we're doing.
Okay, if you give me a minute, I'll do that.
Okay. Take all the time you need.
Thank you.
And thank you, Susan, for continuing to create and foster community with all these activities you've scheduled.
Well, it's very gratifying to help people come together that haven't seemed to have the opportunity to come together before. I mean, I see a lot of fractures in the disability community slowly being mended.
I want to thank Ernest for joining us tonight. It's in the middle of the night for him now, since he's in the UK. Maybe he went to sleep and left his computer on.
And I'm still here, but I am going to have to go soon. It's just gone 1 a.m. in the morning here, so I'm not going to hang on.
Well, I'm going to have to go too. I'm supposed to be on another Zoom call now.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to stay, and I wanted to say hello to you, Mark, because I was so happy to see that you did join us here. And
Yes, Elaine, thank you for the email.
Okay.
As I told John, I appreciate all the emails that he sends me, and I believe this is a way of staying connected to people that I haven't seen in such a very long time.
And I don't, Ifatayo, you never said anything,
being
so.
able to see people in person.
Yeah. So there, we have Ifatayo Harvey. You want to say hello? Or just, you have a beautiful picture.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. This is my first event that I've attended with I Love You Lead On, and I've just been sitting back listening to everyone and learning a lot. I would say before this this event, had I guess a surface level knowledge of what assisted suicide is, and I feel like I've learned a lot more about the topic, just hearing you guys talk about it. And so, yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for having me.
Come again.
Up.
Yeah, if you want to get our calendar, just put your email in the chat box.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to say goodnight. It's been great listening to everybody and so on, and we'll catch up with others soon.
Yeah, good to see you again, Ernest. I've missed you.
We'll catch
Well,
up
good
on.
morning.
Yeah. It is good morning here. Yeah, so we'll catch up on the Sunday, I think. Yeah.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. See you all then. And Tim, it was nice meeting you also.
Good night.
That was
Oh,
neat.
sorry.
You know, I heard some laughter. That was just a few minutes ago. That was really neat to hear that.
You know, laughter is really the best medicine. Laughter
Yeah.
and music goes
Yeah,
right up
it is.
there with love.
Because I was
Laughter, love, and music is the best we can do to
Yeah.
share, to keep each other going. That's really important.
just when this pandemic unfolded about a year ago, it's in 10 months now, I got some old George Carlin comedy.
Ah.
And I was playing it and I started laughing so hard I started crying. It's like, God, that's just what I needed.
That's what we need
He
to
was
do.
a-
We got to
he
keep
was a
do
prophet.
something crazy, laugh every day.
Yep.
Of
course. Recovery back 50 years ago, a friend of mine I hadn't seen for years. Guy, you're so serious. He said, they took me to Harold and Maude. I was on the floor laughing. He said, now that's the Tim I remember. God, I saw that movie. It was just a theater. It was just close by, but I used to go there all the time. Making how he was just trying to get attention and how he was attempting all those fake suicide attempts. It was really something, but it's just, there is laughter, and laughter is just a natural elixir. Everything I ever need to know, I learned in 7th grade. Sister Timothea said, Tim, don't ever lose your sense of humor. Because she always said, it was Timothy, Timothy, Timothy. And I'd say, no. And then she finally gave me, and I could put Tim rather than Timothy on my papers. But I think of her I've said that 1,000 times through my almost 80-year journey.
Okay, I'm heading out now. Love you.
Yep,
Hugs
me
to
too.
each and all.
Speak to you
Bye.
soon.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Stay
Bye.
safe. Be well.